DeadCentre, Day 2. I woke up the next morning, which I thought was pretty fan-fucking-tastic for the end of the world. The night had been relatively smooth sailing, only the occasional bumping and scratching sound. At one point I heard a far-off scream that went on for far too long. I suppose being eaten alive isn't a fast process. Between that and sleeping on a linoleum-covered concrete floor, my sleep was perfectly fucking terrible. Rising to my feet like a decrepit skeleton, the first order of business was checking on Grace. She was still sleeping, and her forehead was hot to the touch. The makeshift tether I'd made from a cable still held her ankle to the table. I hoped the bite didn't transfer the infection, but better to be safe than sorry. "Could have brought me dinner before tying me up," Grace said, one eyelid cracked slightly ajar. "Cheeky sod. I got you a packet of crisps, that counts." I shot back, the epitome of wit. "I'm not shagging you for a packet of Wotsits," she said, face like an angel, gob like a sailor. I bantered with Grace for a while, talking about the usual end-of-the-world stuff, whilst eating a healthy breakfast of cereal bars. The others were starting to wake now, and I started handing out food and making cups of tea. The milk wouldn't last long without electricity, and that was certain to fail sooner or later. We'd have to push for a generator soon, if help didn't arrive in a week. I knew that much. It was the start of a perfectly good day, societal collapse notwithstanding. Then my sister walked in. "I cannot get in touch with head office," Angela said with all seriousness in the world. "What would you like me to do about that? Carry a pigeon?" I shot at her sarcastically. "Given the circumstances, despite the fact that you are no longer an employee of this company, I permit you to stay." She had this way of making bullshit sound completely normal. That made me mad, and Crazy came to visit for the next few seconds. "How about you don't do something stupid, and I won't have to smash your face in with a hammer?" It wasn't a question, and I said it with a smile. Now I'm aware that seems like a massive overreaction, and you'd be right. But this was the last transgression in a long line of bullshit. Like when our mother died, she was the first to sort out her belongings. Now when I was little, my mother had this little glass ornament of a horse that 8-year-old me loved. She left it to me in the will, and when I went to collect it, I found it in pieces on the kitchen floor. I'd had 23 years of that shit, so believe me, undead or not, I was ready to bury my hammer in her face. Angela huffed and left the staff room. She'd never looked comfortable there anyway, like she thought it was beneath her. I knew she only got the job because she had a degree. A degree in what, you ask? Well, not common sense, not business management, not anything useful. Performing fucking arts. Now, I've got nothing against people who study performing arts. It's a perfectly valid subject to become a thespian, a dancer, or a singer. It does not make you management material. I was looking forward to the day she turned. Next, I did what every sane person does in a break room. I went on my phone. The internet, to my great surprise, was still accessible. The immediate headlines read, "Epidemic reanimating the dead," "Millions dead," and my personal favourite, "Do the undead have the same rights as the living?" That one made me chuckle. Logically, I knew I should be a shivering wreck because the world was ending. But I just wasn't. Some things end and others begin. For example, I could, if I was so inclined, walk down to the riverfront, procure a boat and some fishing gear, live on the water. Couldn't have done that 24 hours ago. I'd have needed 6 different permits for the boat alone. The end of the world was beginning to hold more freedom for me, and fuck it, I'm an optimist at heart. All of a sudden, the ephemeral horrors of modern-day living, like trying to afford a mortgage, or whether I'll have enough money to ever retire, disappeared. Now any house was my house, and my only responsibility was my next meal. It was liberating. One by one, people began waking up. The baby started to cry, and I wanted out. The back offices of the shop had never been big, but now they were starting to feel like a fucking coffin. I needed something to do, something useful. My mind mulled over the problems we faced. First was water. We had enough fluids for the foreseeable future, if said future involved being rescued in a week. Including me, there were 13 survivors and 200-ish bottles of fluids. Not big ones either, the 500 milliliter ones. Quick math at about 2 bottles a day plus the water containers we'd filled. There was no telling how long water would still come out of the tap. We were looking at 28 bottles a day, give or take, so 7 days was pushing it. I couldn't think of any immediate solutions for that problem, so I focused my energy on a different task, making the staff rooms more comfortable. It was relatively secure with only 2 ways in or out. The double door into the shop was magnetically locked and the rear door leading into the loading area was inch-thick steel. They were safe for now as long as no one opened the doors. I touched wood, the table, with the thought of it. "I need the bathroom. Can I untie this?" Grace asked, and that pulled me out of my thoughts. I nodded and began untying the knot of electrical cables around her ankle. The implication of it was obvious. The tether wouldn't do anything to stop her if she turned, but it would alert everyone. "What if I do become one of them?" Grace asked. No balls. I didn't want to think about that. "I don't know." I couldn't lie, not to Grace. She thought hard for a second, a crease drawing her eyebrows together. "Promise me you'll end it," she whispered as she offered out her pinky finger. The words nearly broke my heart in two, but I wrapped my finger around hers and Pinky swore I would, praying to a god I'd never believed in the day would never come that I would have to make good on that promise. "You need any help?" I asked. Seemed like the courteous thing to do. "I should be fine. Thanks for the offer, though." She replied with a fake smile. The type you use when you're in pain but you don't want to show it. I could see the weakness in her stance, the way she grabbed the table for support, the red flush of her cheeks at odds with the cold grey-blue of her fingers. She ambled out of the staff room and I let go of a breath I didn't know I was holding. The smart part of my brain told me I should have pushed harder. Anxiety-induced visions of Grace ambling out of the bathroom as a new member of the less-than-living society, ready to finish what the initial outbreak had started. Fortunately for me, that didn't happen. She shuffled back in the break room and dropped into a chair. "I'm going to take it easy today," she said between deep, heavy breaths. "Afraid not. It's stocktake day," I joked with her. The one day no one wants to be working in retail above all others. A thought struck me like a switch being flipped in a dark room. The radios. The shopping centre had radios so you could call for help in the case of an emergency. They clearly didn't imagine said emergency would be end of the world via zombie apocalypse, but hey-ho, it was every retail worker's dream to be able to smash some customers' skulls in. I left the room and headed to the office that held the radios. Luckily it was in the admin office, not Angela's office. It was always a complete mess of old promotional decorations and half-forgotten important documents. The room had a single solitary computer, squished into the corner like an afterthought, that was old enough to still take floppy disks. I had fond memories of spending hours watching health and safety videos while scrolling through my phone. Fun times. The radios sat on the filing cabinet opposite, black and orange little boxes with an antenna sticking out on the top. I had no idea how they worked. I mean, I knew how radios worked, but I had no idea how these radios worked. I picked one up, turned the top dial to what I assumed was channel 1, and held the side button. "Testing, testing. Is anyone there?" I said, feeling like the world's biggest prat. Then I waited in silence. The kind of silence where your heartbeat becomes too loud. Even the soft hum of the old fluorescent lights overhead were too much. A noise broke the silence like thunder as a radio belched static. "I'm here, who's this?" The voice sounded female. "My name's Sam. Who am I speaking to?" I replied, my customer service voice coming out despite the apocalypse. "This is Daisy. I'm from the centre management team." "Are you safe?" "I'm currently in one of the shops," I replied. No sense giving our positions away or our numbers. I'd seen the movies. It didn't take long for humans to become animals if you deprived them of food and water. "Yes, a few of us barricaded into the office, but help is on the way. We contacted the emergency services yesterday," Daisy told me. The radio only just gave away her accent from down south. She was still holding her job, and I couldn't fault her for that. There was safety in it, comfort in the routine even if the world was falling apart. It was useful information that helped confirm a few things. 1. This was happening everywhere. 2. The emergency services are gone, or so overwhelmed they can't respond to a crisis at one of the biggest shopping centres in the whole country. 3. They were in it for the long haul. It wasn't going to be cleaned up quickly and just be a chapter in a history book. It was quite possibly the end of all history books. That's great, I replied, knowing full well it was never going to happen. I'll give the radio to a friend and we can check in every 2 hours. That's a good idea. Just hang tight and everything will be all right, Daisy replied, with words I could tell didn't quite reach her heart. I left the room with the radio and found Hazel. She looked dishevelled. The usually perfect makeup and hair was showing signs of being left unattended. That was concerning. I'd have to keep an eye on everyone's morale. Take this. There's other survivors that are in the management offices. Check in with them every 2 hours, but don't tell them where we are or how many of us there is, I told her. Why? She looked puzzled. Better we play it safe. I don't want them to know more than they need to in case things get worse, I replied, not trying to freak her out. Ed came bursting in the hallway before I could say any more. Hazel, there's something wrong with Grace, he spat out, panic plastered over his face. I followed Hazel as we shot past him into the break room to see Grace on the floor, her body twitching with convulsions. All of the other survivors stared in horror. That wasn't good. I looked to Hazel for a brief moment with hope in my heart before remembering she was a first aider, not an epidemiologist. I rushed over to her and pressed my hand against her forehead. Saying she was hot would be like calling the sun lukewarm. Grace needed antibiotics and a doctor, and she needed them fast. Ed, clear the table in the admin office. Hazel, get us some cold cloths. We need to get her fever down. I told them as I picked her off the floor. I had no chance of getting her a doctor, since the nearest hospital was a 20-minute drive away on a good day. God knows what the apocalypse does to commuting times. I didn't fancy my chances of getting there and back. That left antibiotics. There was a pharmacy, but it was pretty much on the other side of the shopping centre. A centre that was now filled with a couple thousand hungry, mindless cannibals. I carried Grace into the admin office and laid her down on the table. Hazel followed in behind me and placed a cold damp cloth across her brow. She still had the radio in her hand. The radio? That gave me an idea. We'll need to keep her arms and legs bound as a precaution. Hand me that box of cables and the radio, I told Ed and Hazel. As soon as I got my hands on the box, I began tying them together into 3 separate braids. One longer one to loop under the table and connect her wrists, then one for each leg. I'm going to go to the pharmacy and get antibiotics, I told them. That's not a good idea, Ed said. Not meaning any ill will to Grace, but he was just being pragmatic. It still pissed me off. I know I'm not thinking logically, but I can't do nothing, I replied before raising the radio and pressing the button. Daisy, are you there? I asked the little box in my hand and waited. Going through the mall was suicide, but I didn't have to go through the mall. There was service tunnels and corridors around the entire centre that would be far less populated, possibly even empty. Yes, I'm here. Daisy came through just as I was about to radio again. Thank God. I need to get to the pharmacy from the service yard near the bus station. What's the quickest way without going through the mall? The service yard was directly outside the rear door of the back office, and that way I didn't have to give away what shop we were in. The best route would be the roof. There's a service elevator that will go to the 2nd floor, then a set of stairs that'll take you to the roof, Daisy told me. I knew the service elevator she was talking about. It was directly to the left as you left the back of our shop. If I take the radio, can you guide me? I asked her. Yes, but I recommend you stay where you are and wait for help, Daisy replied, clearly not thrilled at the prospect of holding my life in her hands. I didn't blame her. One of my friends doesn't have that kind of time. She'd be lucky to last a day. I had no idea if that was true. I was desperate. Fine, I'll do it, she sounded resigned. Thank you, I breathed, a sigh of relief. I'll let you know when we've set off. I'll come with you, Ed volunteered. I wish I'd had the balls to say he should stay and look after everyone, but I was quite frankly shitting bricks. I nodded and set off to find my backpack, running into Jackie on the way. I explained what was happening and told her to make sure no one did anything stupid. I met back up with Ed by the back door, and he'd grabbed his weapon of choice. He'd be working on it all day. It was a broom handle with a kitchen knife welded to the end of it through duct tape, screws, and sheer force of will. "Daisy, I'm heading out," I told the radio. "Close this behind us, and don't open it unless you hear us knock 5 times, I told Jackie. She nodded, and I pressed the pressure release bar, and slowly the door crept open. The service yard was empty of shambling horrors, but there were plenty of places to hide. The bigger problem, the sun was setting. When did it get so late? 18-wheelers and delivery vans usually littered the yard, but now it was just an eclectic selection of staff vehicles. That was a shame. I'd hoped for a sizable vehicle to use an escape plan if needed. Refuse blew in the wind as I scanned the surroundings, but no one dead. I slipped into the wide open space and felt like a mouse scurrying in an open field, well aware of the hawks that lay in wait. Ed followed, then the door slid shut with a much louder clank than I'd wanted it to. I winced. I waited. Sure, I was going to be torn apart by unseen hands, hammer tight within my grasp. No death came, so I pressed onwards. The elevator was a clear shot straight left, so we half ran, half jogged to it, trying to make as little noise as possible. We pulled up against the doors of the elevator, then I realized our problem. The elevator wasn't on our level. We needed to call it and wait. Fuck. I hit the button and tried my best to keep an eye on the elevator, and behind us, my breath felt like I couldn't get enough air into my lungs, and my heart was like a hammer on an anvil. Ding. Now, a service elevator isn't like a commercial one. The doors don't automatically slide open. You have to pull the outer gate open, then the inner one. Ed covered me as I got to work. The noise was like nails on the chalkboard of my sanity. The outer gate hadn't seen a can of WD-40 in a decade. Still, no one dead had crept up behind us and gutted me like a fish, so all was going well. I pulled open the inner gate, and a pair of arms came grasping for my face. I recoiled back by instinct and swung my hammer at the bastard. It hit its head, but he was wearing a fucking hard hat. My blow stunned it, but did little more. With no time to think, I rushed it and pinned it against the back of the elevator. Teeth smashed inches away from my face, and spittle lashed my cheeks like rain. A knife flashed from over my shoulder and bit deep into the face opposite mine, splitting it right between the eyes. The dead maintenance worker died again and went limp against my grip. I let him drop to the floor before I thought to drag him out of the elevator, so I grabbed his legs and hauled him out, my heart beating the inside of my ribcage like a madman in a jail cell. Inside the service elevator, however, was a pallet full of bottled water. Thank God for minor miracles, eh? We could find a way to get it on our way back. For now, I pulled the gate shut as the sun finally set and the night began. That is the end of day 2. Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed, and don't forget to subscribe for the next episode.